All right. Well, I don't know if Greg's thing is working right now. He's having some internet issues. Of course, there was an accident that derailed me on the way home from an appointment. So we got a little bit of a late start today, which, it's the spring. It's not fall yet. So it's not quite ready for, actual games yet. So, consider it a test run, just like how this blue gold game is a test run for everything else going forward. We'll wait for kind of Greg to get it all figured out now. Until then, thanks everyone for joining. Sorry for the delay. Sorry for, the technical issues, but we're going to talk about the spring game. We're going to talk about some of the blue gold game visitors that are going and some of the scratches, unfortunately, which, that happens with recruiting. We're going to talk about kind of what to expect, what we want to see from the team, really. As anyone who follows me or reads what I write for Irish Sports Today, I don't put a lot of stock into the spring game. It is even less than a glorified scrimmage, I would say, because you're obviously going to be pretty vanilla on defense. You're not going to show too much scheme on offense. You're not going to do too much. So you're not going to see really what the team is going to look like from that perspective. You're also not going to see a ton of the veterans too much, right? You know what you got in those guys. So it really is a chance for less about the competition where you're going to see, there we go. There's Greg. He's back.
Hey guys.
Yeah.
Well, what a disaster. This whole day has just been a disaster with the thing. I don't know. I don't know how long this is going to work out. My internet has been really weird. So we're going to check that out. Jamie, have you done ESQ clothing yet?
I have not. I
have not done ESQ clothing. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do the intro again for the podcast. So we'll do the whole thing. All right, so we'll do that. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Freeman. With me, as always, is Jamie Ueyama at Jamie University. It is Thursday, April 20th, and we've got the Notre Dame spring game coming up. They just did the draft. We don't know the full teams yet because, Jamie, that Chris Tyree doesn't have a team. JD Bertrand doesn't have a team. Maris doesn't have a team. Jordan Botelho doesn't have a team. So we got to get that all adjudicated and figured out. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about that for as long as my internet will support it. And then we'll talk about some of the recruiting stuff. And so we're going to get into that. Want to get before we get to anything, ESQclothing.com. This is 2 days left in the promotion for the Notre Dame spring game. 23% off of all ESQ gear. Type in ISD spring into the promotion code, and that will give you 23% off all the ESQ clothing stuff. Marcus Freeman wears ESQ clothing. Notre Dame players wear ESQ clothing. Every time you see them run down on the player walk, they're all wearing ESQ suits. Really good stuff. Check that out. You're going to want to check it out 2 days before. It expires on the 22nd. It'll be over. Spring game's over. That's when it'll expire. So that's what we're going to talk about. If this is your first time listening to the show, hit the like, hit subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Check us out on our Apple Pods on the podcast feed. The links are in the description below. All right, Jamie. I'm all flustered.
All right.
There's so much going on. I don't like it when I don't know about the internet and the setup and everything. Today it's just been, I don't know why. There's no explanation for it, so I'm gonna have to get it figured out. But let's talk a little bit about the teams. So it's the gold team is going to be the Sam Hartman, Steve Angeli team. The blue team is going to be Tyler Buckner and Kenny Minchie. Let's see the receivers for the receivers and running backs for the gold team. They're going to be Jabron Payne, who was the number one pick. Smart pick, in my opinion, because he's going to get the most work.
He's going to play the most.
He's going to play the most. That was a very smart pick by
draft Audric Kastemi. He might have 5 carries.
He might have 5 carries. No good.
Yeah.
So they went Jabron Payne. Very good, smart pick. The receivers are Jaden Thomas, Jaden Greathouse, and am I missing one more person? I feel like Lorenzo Styles is an athlete. So
he'll play both ways.
He'll play both ways. So it's Jaden Thomas, Jaden Greathouse, Lorenzo Styles, and there was one more, and I hope I'm forgetting somebody.
Those are the main receivers for that team. Or wait a second here. Let me look to see who else we're missing there. No, those are like the kind of like the big scholarship receivers.
And we need to know where Tyree's going to play. We need to know that sort of thing.
Yes. And I don't think they announced where there's, so that's the other thing. Like these veterans have already been kind of assigned to teams.
Yeah.
Which, maybe make it a little bit more clear before that. That would have been.
It would be better. It would be better, because I'm sitting there thinking like, where are these guys? Where are they? Where are they included?
Why aren't they the first off the board? Yeah.
Why aren't they the first off the board? Tell Greg his insights have never been better today. Come on, Coach. Humph. That's not nice. Just because I wasn't here in the internet, that's not cool. No, I'm just kidding, man. I appreciate you for being here. And I appreciate everyone for being here and suffering through all of our problems. So, all right. So the blue team, Buckner, Estime, Tobias, first wide receiver taken. I took note of that. First wide receiver off the board. And then there's going to be Rico Flores. There's going to be Braylon James.
Deion Colsey.
And Deion Colsey is also on there. Holden Stays. He got the starting tight end there. Mitchell Evans won't be playing in the game. Neither will Kevin Bauman. So Davis Sherwood's the tight end for the gold team. So I don't know. It depends on where. Like I kind of like the receiving core better for the blue, but if Chris Tyree goes to the gold, then I'm kind of in on that. So that'll be interesting, Jamie. But what are you looking for there? What are you looking for in this spring game for you? Just things that are going to stand out in terms of like, hey, this is what I'm watching for. This is what I'm going to pay close attention to.
Well, I mean, I don't really care who wins, Notre Dame blue or gold. Right. I mean, let me just say that Notre Dame, Notre Dame wins if no one gets injured, right? That's the way to kind of look at it. Like where last year, where Logan Diggs had the shoulder, which really kind of hurt him. I mean, literally hurt him, but hurt Notre Dame at the beginning of the season where he wasn't fully ready. He was close. But he didn't really kind of take off until the last month. And then he averaged like 16 touches a game from the fourth game on. Right. So, and he basically was the starter, right? He was the guy who was getting the most touches. And like Estime was probably like 1B. So that was, that wasn't an ideal situation for Notre Dame. You don't want to have anything like that happen. You hope that no one gets injured like that. Obviously, it could have been worse if it was something where he missed a season, but main thing is you want to come out of this healthy. For me, it's all about the young guys. Like, okay, don't overreact to anything of like, because it's like a mishmash up front, right? So, we got Joe Alt, Emil Wagner, Michael Carmody, Billy Schrauth, Rocco Spindler as, that's the starting five basically for the gold team on offense. Is that combination ever going to play together this season? Probably not. Right. And then, same thing with the other thing where you got Blake Fisher, Tosh Baker, Ashton Craig, Pat Coogan, Sam Pendleton. That combination is not going to play together either. So it's like, you can't overreact to like, oh, this, things don't look in sync in terms of blocking and all that. Like, and because they're going to be purposely vanilla on defense, right? I think one out of every, you're only allowed to bring pressure on like one out of every 3 or 4. I can't remember. Sorry if it was 3 or 4 plays on defense. So you're not going to see much from that angle. So it's like if someone is in terms of like linebackers really making a splash, it's not a game for that, right? It's not a game for that. CFB Hertz asks, is Corral playing center for both teams? I don't think so because Ashton Craig can play for center for one team, and so can Coogan, right? So Corral isn't listed because he's one of these guys who is going to be, already assigned a team, right? So that's the way to kind of look at it, right? And I imagine, like, say, Sam Pendleton, who, I mean, he'll play at the end, but he's not going to play with the main group at the beginning, right? So that's the way to kind of look at it. But um, I think it's all about the young guys, right? It's you can't, even though it's another data point to take a look at, like how Buckner and Hartman do. It's not a regular offense they're working with, so you can't judge it too much. And also because they're not getting pressure and they're not going to, it's a completely different thing that you're going to look at. You just want to see flashes from the young guys, right? You want to see flashes from the young guys, specifically from the early enrollees and the guys who are going into their second year, who especially didn't play last year, right? So it's like, if you don't see much from Benjamin Morrison in the game, no one's going to care, because you already know that Benjamin Morrison's a player and a guy who can play at a high level against top competition. But I think you want to see something from, like, Jaden Mickey, right? You want to see Jaden Mickey play well. You want to see Tobias Merriweather play well. You want to see Holden Stace play well. You want to see Josh Burnham, like Junior Tui Halamaka, all these guys, right? Those are the guys you kind of want to see stand out. And in flash, Jalen Sneed certainly got to be at the top of the list, especially because, when the media was present, he wasn't available to practice, right? So that's somebody I think everybody's going to be keeping a close eye on. But at the same time, you don't overreact to any kind of, like, this guy did this or this guy did that, because a lot of people remember Dalen Hayes' 3 sacks in the 2017 spring game was not a sign of things to come. He was not ready to break out yet, right? So, and it just is one of those things too, where you look at it and you're like, a couple of those were unblocked sacks, right? So you have to just kind of judge it and see where it goes. I'm not saying don't get excited about seeing something good that's happening, but don't put it in stone that this guy's going to be a star because of this. Well, I think I think Greg might be still having some problems here, so I'll apologize for that as we kind of keep going here. You know what? I think James Lawrence Senzi, he mentioned Billy and Tosh at guard, and obviously Billy Schrouth is a guy who's going to play guard. But I mean, I'll be interested to see if they give Tosh Baker a look at guard in this game. I think based on his team, he's probably going to play tackle in this game. But since Joe Rudolph mentioned that he was a guy that he thought they could slide into guard, I mean, I would love to see that, because we haven't seen that from him. And I do think, I think people have, heard me say and write on Irish Sports Daily that Tosh Baker is a guy that just, if you walk into a room with him, you're like, this guy has to play in the NFL, because guys who are built like him play in the NFL, right? And really, considering where he's at in terms of his timeline with his thing, it's like, well, he's kind of got to play this year. So, if you kind of hope for him to be, have a chance to play in the league, he kind of has to do it now, right? Like he has to be a guy who plays now. He has to be one of the 5 best guys. And if he's one of the 5 best guys, then maybe they do kick him inside the guard and take a look at him there. And I'll be interested to kind of see, what he looks like there. I will say that I think it's weird, because he was kind of seen when he was recruited as someone who was more athlete, a guy who hadn't played a ton of offensive line. It was like, oh, here's this big guy basketball player, kind of viewing him as like almost like a Ronnie Stanley type, because that was the book on Stanley, right? He was this guy who was like, oh, look at this big man with the good feet who can play basketball. But really, I don't think Baker, I mean, it's one, he's not quite as agile as that. So that's part of it. And the other thing is that, I think the 6'8" in that part of it was more of like the basketball thing with him. It's not like he has bad feet or anything like that, but he's not like a total dancing bear like some of these other guys. Certainly don't think he's as agile as like a Joe Alt in terms of how he moves, who's, obviously similarly built. But I think Baker, one thing that I think has kind of surprised me over the years is that, he gets after it in the running game, right? Like I see him put some guys on the ground in practice, play physical. So, I want to see him out of a guy who's been on the campus for a long time. I mean, definitely want to see more of him. Hopefully, get a look at a guard. I think Michael Carmody is another guy too, who he was running with the ones at the beginning of spring, and then he was out for a long period of spring, enough that he didn't practice for both of the open practices to the media. But they say he's going to be available in this game, so this will be our only look at him. Much like what I said with Jalen Sneed, it'll be the only look that we get to see of him. How does he look? I mean, weight has always been an issue with him. Is he a guy who actually has a chance at starting, at playing? I mean, I don't think when he's played and got in there, he hasn't looked out of place. He certainly didn't look out of place as a guy. He looked like he was going to be a guy who had a chance to be a future starter when he came in as a backup in that original like Florida State game against Florida State at the beginning of the 2021 season when Blake Fisher went down with that injury. But I'll say that he's smaller since then, which is crazy. I don't know what's going on with the weight. It's something we've talked about before. I have no idea what the heck's going on with that. But I mean, I want to know more, and I want to see more of him and whether or not he's a guy who can actually play for Notre Dame. And we just don't know enough about that at this time. I'll say, like, out of the other kind of veterans that I want to see, Chance Tucker. That's a guy that where is he at? How does he kind of fit in terms of the depth chart? Is he a guy who can kind of make plays? And I think for even a guy like him, that's where this kind of game does matter, because every little thing matters with him when you're going to get a lot more reps than maybe you normally are used to. So can he make plays on the ball? Is he someone who can stand out in a way where, he does look like he's a guy who can be like the fourth corner on the team? And if not, is that something where like that totally opens the door for Lorenzo Styles, right? And I mean, I really don't know what to think of Lorenzo Styles moving to corner yet. And this could be just a couple week experiment. I think there's people who kind of mentioned too that I think a lot of people are kind of disappointed by it, because even though he had the bad season last year, let's just call it what it is. It was a bad season, right? He had problems catching the ball. And then he went from a guy who in the first half of the year was targeted as much as anybody. I'm more than any other wide receiver on the team, second most targets next to Michael Mayer. And, that dropped down like by more than half in the second half of the season. And it's because he couldn't catch the ball. And he has made plays as a freshman. Like he made plays in big games. Like he made plays against USC, against Virginia on the road, against North Carolina, explosive plays. He had more receiving yards against Oklahoma State than anyone during the entire 2020 season, not just any Notre Dame player, any receiver that they played. And obviously they play in a pretty pass happy league in the Big 12, where guys are slinging it around. That was a very good defense. It was a top 4 defense in DF plus, the combined F plus and the combined FEI and SP plus rating. So I think James mentioned it here, the catch against Ohio State to start the season, just a guy breaking a tackle and taking it for like 50 yards. Like that is something that you just haven't seen enough from everybody else. So if they're making this move, it has to be one, either they just really don't have the kind of confidence in him there to be somebody at receiver, or they really just think like, okay, he's not going to be a starter. These other guys are going to start in front of him. And maybe that's what's pushing him too, to be like, listen, like I want to play, give me a chance at corner, give me a chance at defensive back, and let's see where it goes. He mentioned he has 3 semesters left before graduating. So, I mean, it's pretty much now or never, really, right? For this year for him. or else he's going to be out and he's going to go somewhere else. And I just think of a guy like that who played as much as he has as a freshman or sophomore. Majority of those guys who don't have injury problems or don't have off the field problems, majority of those guys end up being NFL players. And I think he has talent to play in the NFL one day. So whether that's defensive back or receiver. So yeah, I think I would love to just see something from him in this game, something from him just where you just see some kind of glimmer there where you're thinking like, okay, this is where he's going to be. I think out of the guys that I think we probably know the least about going forward in terms of we didn't see much from them, right? Like I think Notre Dame fans heard, probably anyone who's read the practice reports knows that like a guy like Jason Onye, he showed up. He looks like he's going to be a rotation player. He looks like he has a chance to be a really good player for Notre Dame and be a guy that they can count on, right? And with a pretty high upside in terms of like, I think he's only going to get better, right? He's only going to get better. And I'm excited to see him, but less so because you saw, especially for anyone who was at those practices, saw him, or anyone who read about it and was like, we heard about him. So didn't see a lot of Tyson Ford. So Tyson Ford is 100% as a guy like, I want to see Tyson Ford show out in some way, right? Show out in some way, make it look like this guy has a chance to be break into the rotation this year, right? Does he have a chance to break in the rotation, chance to be a guy? Ditto for Josh Burnham, who I think we saw more of in those practices, but still, I think you want to see a little bit more to kind of see where he's at. And then I think with the linebackers, Prince Colley's out for this. Obviously he was in concussion protocol. Sure, they're just being safe. That he had a concussion at the beginning of last season as well. It's just totally unfortunate because, what do you got in him? He was kind of gaining momentum at the time when he had his concussion in the season too. And then, it obviously didn't all click for him during the season. Like he had some flashes, but he didn't play particularly well. Or else I think, there was an opportunity there for him to take a lot of snaps at will if he had played better. And I just don't think he played to the level that, they would have wanted him to be at. And now we just don't know of where he's at. So that's going to be kind of TBD all summer if he stays. And I think that there's an equally good chance he stays, but we'll see. You never know, right? You never know what's going to happen, and how he's going to view things. But I think because he's not available, it gives an opportunity for Nolan Ziegler is going to get a ton of reps in this game, and I think he's someone who's probably people are going to be talking about quite a bit. Drake Bowen and Preston Zinner are going to get a ton of reps in this game. I think Drake Bowen is, obviously hardcore Notre Dame fans who have followed recruiting for a long time. Obviously, he's been a long time commit. He's an Indiana kid, super talented, top 100 prospect. I think he won the Buckus Award as a high school senior. Usually a pretty good indication the guy's going to be a player at the college level. So where is he at right now in terms of like the depth chart? Does he have a chance to be like, pushing to be like in the 2 deep? I would say probably now, no. But maybe this is one of these things where you're like, it's a jumping off point to him getting there. Right. And right now, I think it's about positioning himself to be, this whole season should be about positioning himself to have a chance to be the starting Mike Backer in 2024, right? That should be what the whole season's about. So, and this is just another opportunity to kind of show that and kind of see where he's at there. I think Jabron Payne, it's kind of like everybody's first long look at him. Oh, Greg's back.
Greg's back. I'm listening.
Back.
Keep. I've been listening the whole time. Keep up your train of thought. And then I'll
so I think Jabron Payne, that's another guy that, I mean, he's going to get a ton of run in this game. And while I would say, like, you know, the spring game means less for some people than it does for others, I think for Jabron Payne, it does mean something, because you are going to get all these opportunities, and you hope that he has a decent enough blocking that he has a chance to kind of make some plays. But you always have to remember that Diggs is out for this game, right? So, you know, but you know Diggs is going to be a factor this year. You know Estime is going to be a factor this year. And JD Price, I think the expectations is that if he's healthy, he is going to be a big factor. He's going to be that different change of pace for them in the backfield. So you basically have Price coming, and you have Jeremiah Love coming, right? Who's also visiting this weekend, right? Before he enrolls in June. And those are two pretty dynamic athletes. So
yeah,
how's Payne going to separate himself? And is he going to be someone that plays? Because it's just one of these things too, where if he doesn't kind of establish himself, it's so easy to just get lost in the shuffle at running back, because you know, even though they'll play multiple guys, like, who knows what's going to happen the next year, because, you know, those other guys are going to be back and probably better, right? And then you're going to have, are Estime or Diggs going to leave early? I would say probably not. Maybe Estime has, maybe, but I don't think it's like a sure thing that either of those guys leave early. So, I mean, it could probably be a very crowded backfield again, and you got to do as much as possible to kind of show why, hey, I deserve to play. I'm glad he's been healthy, because that was obviously a big problem for him, you know, in high school, right? Where he just couldn't stay healthy. You good now, Greg? Okay. Well, I guess Greg is still not good. So, okay. If anyone has questions about the spring game, guys this spring, you know, where I kind of view everything kind of heading into the spring game, what are the main kind of takeaways we're going to look for after, ask away in there, and I'll get to it. But now I'm going to transition to the guys who are visiting for the Blue Gold game. And I mean, people subscribe to our Sports Daily already know, unfortunately, there's a couple big scratches for the spring game. So Gerby Lambert, who's offensive lineman, 2024 offensive lineman, who was, you know, very high on the board for Notre Dame. He's like a top 100 level prospect. A guy who, you know, one of the better it's not a strong class, but he is one of the better offensive tackles in this class. So him not being there, I mean, that's not great. But, you know, we'll see where they're at going out of it. And then Benedict Ume, who had to kind of scratch a couple of visits. He's a defensive lineman. I mean, he's listed as a defensive end, but he's going to be a 3-tech at Notre Dame or wherever he decides to go. That's kind of his thing, or like a 4-eye defensive end and a 3 down front. That's kind of his position. I mean, really, I would say you're looking at guys like him and TJ Lindsey and Bryce Young, who are visiting. Those guys kind of play similar positions, although I think that Young, I would say, is more of an edge who could maybe grow into a 3-tech. Lindsey, I think, is definitely going to be an interior guy. So those are big time guys. I think, you know, Bryce Young, who's Bryant Young's son, for everyone who doesn't know, obviously, Bryant Young, NFL Hall of Famer, you know, Notre Dame legend, fantastic first round top 10 pick of the San Francisco 49ers on that great 1993 Lou Holtz team. I think that's a guy that you're going to watch. So I think he's visited a ton of schools. I think he's a guy who has as high of a ceiling as anyone. He's only played 1 year defensive line. So that's another thing to think about with him. He was like a linebacker receiver before he kind of moved to the edge this year. Al Washington offered him before he had played defensive line. He worked out as an edge guy at camp. I think it was a pretty good eval. He looks good to me. I think he still has a lot of room to grow, not just physically, but technically with his game. That's going to be an important guy. So, I'll go back to recruiting in a sec, but I'll get to some of these questions here. From Brandon Renshaw at guard, if it's close, don't you go with the younger guys? I think that's always the thought of fans, that if it's close, you go with the younger guys, because they're always thinking about, the ceiling, right? And where you're at. But I think coaches, for the most part, go with the guys with the higher floors and go with the veterans, the guys who maybe know the system better, the guys who maybe are physically a little bit more mature, because they don't want to be put in a situation where, growing pains by a young guard loses you games, right? It gets your quarterback killed, right? Make sure that you aren't converting on that 3rd and 1, right? Like, and that's the way, I think coaches thinking, I get it. I totally understand it. So that's why, like, if Kristofic isn't going to be a starter, like, someone has to clearly be better than him. That's just the way it is. That's the way they're going to look at it. And that's the way they're going to look at it with all of those guys, right? And I know there's a new coach that kind of changes it a little bit. Rudolph replacing Harry Hiestand, that changes a little bit. At the same time, like, you're going to look at something like, what has this guy done on Saturdays? Is this guy, is there proof? So that's why when Rudolph mentioned beforehand, when he was asked by the media and he was asked by, how he's going to look at it, that's why he said, like, the spring game matters for him when he's evaluating, because it's just another chance to look at someone in a game type of atmosphere, right? The scrimmage last week, I'm sure that mattered to him. And obviously we didn't see it. And, you only hear about most of the kind of the skill guys more than you do the line play. But I wonder kind of how he viewed that and how everything was viewed through that lens. But I do think that, from everything I've heard, some of the younger guys are getting better and they're really pushing. And I do think that Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame's ultimately going to be fine at guard. I do think that that's going to happen. I don't see this like the 2021 situation where they had to get a Kane Madden because they were desperate. And then they moved Corral, which obviously was not something that worked out very well for Notre Dame. I don't see it like that for Notre Dame. I think it's probably closer to what it was last year. But certainly I think what fans should probably hope for is they should probably hope that it's like Billy Schrauth and Rocco Spindler, or Coogan or whoever, right? Like they should hope that it's these other guys, because I think, with Andrew Kristofic, I think he can be fine. But you want better than fine, right? You want to Notre Dame to play up to a certain level. And that you're going to get that with the 2 tackles, Joe Alden, Blake Fisher. Zeke Correll, there's going to be a baseline there for him that he's going to play pretty well. You got to at least hit that at guard, but you want more, right? Like people want Quentin Nelson. You don't want Josh Lugg. And I don't mean that shade as Josh Lugg, but you want guys who are going to be top notch players. And that's what matters. So, CFB Hertz asks, how do you feel about Culley's development so far? Is he on pace or behind schedule considering where he's coming in as a recruit? Okay, I think it's a bit of a complicated question. Thanks for throwing that up there on the screen, Greg. Greg doing the production work, even though his thing's not working that well. Appreciate it, Greg. I think I mentioned this as there were Prince Culley is probably one of the more polarizing players for Notre Dame fans in terms of he came in, obviously, he was a top 100 recruit, was a guy that Alabama, LSU, etc., tried to poach late when Clark Lee left for Vanderbilt. he's another guy who won the high school Buckus. He was a very, very exciting prospect. But when he came in to Notre Dame, he played pretty much like a rover position for his high school, right? He was like a space backer, right? So like a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah type, right? And that's where he came in at Notre Dame, and that's where he worked at Notre Dame in his first camp. And he was like the only freshman linebacker on that team. And Kahanokia moved to Viper, so Culley was the only freshman basically on that team, and he was stuck behind. At that time, it was Kaiser. I want to say Paul Mwala and somebody else at rower. So he was like not getting reps in that first camp. And then all of a sudden they had like injuries and all of these things that kind of happened where things started to shift, where Maris Liefau, broke his ankle like in a pretty bad way in camp. Shane Simon ended up getting hurt and he was out. And then all of a sudden JD Bertrand's starting at will, and you don't really have much depth there. And then all of a sudden Culley gets moved to will. So he didn't practice there. Like he came in the summer. He wasn't early, really. He didn't practice there. All of a sudden got there. And then I think he got sick. And I'm not sure if it was COVID or something like that, but he was out for some time because he was sick. So his first year, which, he just wasn't, it wasn't a typical first year in terms of development. Right. And then I think last year in spring, he showed some stuff and showed some flashes. And then he was hurt a lot of camp last year too. So he's hurt a lot of camp. And then also at the beginning of the season, and then with something else, I believe it was like a hamstring or something with his lower body. And then he gets a concussion. And then, so that kind of kept him out early on in the year. So he missed a ton of development time. And then he kind of just got thrown into it. And to be honest, I think if you'd say his athletic ability, you would say, man, I don't know why this guy hasn't clicked yet. But then you look at where most linebackers are in college football and at Notre Dame too, right? Like Tavon Coney, year 3 explosion, right? Drew Tranquil took till year 4 for Drew Tranquil to really get it. Asmar Burrell was like year 5, right? So those are just those guys, but that is typically where you'll see like most linebackers, right? I think, even like Jalen Smith, 5-star, like top 5 guy in the class. Yeah, he was like a year 2 guy, but he was a different level than a Culley. And I think with Culley, it just didn't really all click for him last year. And so you're hoping that it all clicked for him this year. I thought he looked pretty good in the one open practice that we had on April 1st. Showed some stuff during the inside run. I thought he had just a couple of like really good, like confident reads where he just was playing downhill. Good block destruction, looked like a player. But then, he gets hurt again. So I don't know. Like his development path would suggest that this is the year where everything's going to click for him and he's going to be a guy. But it just, I don't know if you're going to judge it that way. Maybe it's never going to happen. That happens sometimes. Or I think this is pretty typical and he's just got to stay healthy. He's got to stay healthy to do that. And yes, Tyler, we did see that Estime was taken second over Payne. And Greg and I kind of talked about that earlier. The main thing is like Esteme's probably going to get like not a ton of touches in this game, right? They want to keep him healthy, right? So it makes sense to draft Payne because Payne, he's probably going to get like 20 carries in the game. They're going to give him the ball a lot because Diggs is out too, right? So I think from that sense, it totally made sense to not take Estime because, if I was Notre Dame, I'd play Estime for like 2 series and get him out of there. So that's the way that I would kind of look at it. Okay. Greg asked from before, are the quarterbacks a story for you, Jamie? What do you want to see from those guys? I don't think this. Okay, I don't think Buckner and Hartman are a story for me in this game. I mean, obviously, you want people will want to see Hartman. I mean, Notre Dame fans will want to see that. They want to see Buckner. They want to see these guys who are competing for the job. I mean, in saying that, because the offensive lines they're working behind are a mishmash. Some of the receivers units are a mishmash. Like that, you wouldn't see. I don't know how many reps those guys are going to get in this. So because of that, I just don't know what you're going to look at there. I think ultimately, like this is, it's not going to be a thing that plays too much a part of like the evaluation there. So for me, it'll be a lot more about Angeli and Minchie, right? Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie. And Steve Angeli, obviously, he's been a year on campus. Kenny Minchie, he's an early enrollee. Heard Kenny Minchie had a great scrimmage, right? Had a really good scrimmage. Obviously, going against the threes when he was doing it, but that's never a bad sign when you heard that he had a great scrimmage last week. So I think that with those guys, I think you just want to see a little bit what you saw from Angeli last year, where you're like, oh, this guy made some plays. He played confident, right? He played confident. You want to see some wow stuff from them, right? Like, oh, yeah, here's a guy who escaped the rush and dropped a dime over the shoulder of somebody, right? You want to see some of that kind of stuff and just poise, because there's probably going to be a lot of stuff where things break down and where they have to make plays outside of the structure of the play. And you want to see kind of that from them. And I mean, to be honest, it could be pretty interesting. I think you would say right now, Angeli's pretty firmly the number 3. I think that's how they've kind of treated it in the other open practices, where he is the number 3 at this moment. But, I think this is kind of one of these things where maybe it's a really strong game from Minchie. And, he already had a strong scrimmage the other day too. Maybe it's the kind of thing that as the season goes along and you get to the season, he could, jump over Angeli. And I think that is something that probably, I mean, he'll want to do if he wants to be, either the backup in 2024 or contending to start in 24. That's kind of where you look at it. So I think that's the main thing to look at quarterbacks. So, all right. So, well, thanks for that, Tyler. I appreciate that. Yeah. Makes a ton of sense from that point of view. You rock, brother. I mean, I'll take it. I'll take the compliment. I appreciate it. So, okay. Kenneth James, I know it just adds to the offseason minutia, but couldn't really see a difference in height between Hartman and TB12. I mean, is this just based on just like looking at like practice footage, or maybe them side by side? I mean, Tyler Buckner is he's not 6'4". But I mean, he's definitely taller than Hartman. I mean, ultimately, I don't think based on Buckner's bigger than Hartman. That's part of the case. And it's also, he's like bigger, thicker. That's part of it. I mean, Hartman's just not a big guy. He's more Ian Bookish, I guess, in terms of size. Ultimately, I don't know how much that would play into it. I mean, Hartman obviously has played many years and started many years in college football. Held up pretty well. And I mean, the guy, he had a rib friggin' removed and has played. So I think that, with that, like, I think he's a pretty tough kid. I mean, he'll be fine either way. I think everyone always wonders with Buckner, and they're worried about the injuries. And I get it. Like he's missed time. He's missed time since he's been at Notre Dame, tore his knee when he was in high school. He's got to prove that he can stay healthy for a year. And especially if he won the job, that's going to be something you worry about with him, right? Like until it isn't, until he does stay healthy for a year, right? That's just the way it is. But I don't think you can change the way that a guy like that plays because there's too much value with him as a runner. Maybe you just say like, hey, don't lower your shoulder. I mean, maybe take this one out of bounds. And that's the way to kind of look at it with those guys. All right. So Bernie missing the bird sanctuary, but it turns out Jamie, great part of the team, are going solo. I appreciate that, Bernie. I miss those birds too. I miss Greg on here. I do. All right. So let's flip it back to the blue gold game visitors. So I wanted to hit on the defensive line again too, right? So I mentioned Bryce Young, TJ Lindsey. These are two guys that are really important recruits, right? For Notre Dame, because if you land these guys together with an Owen Waffle, now you're cooking with gas, right? Like I think you really have the foundation of something there. And then I think on top of that, I think maybe the most important defensive line guy visiting this week is Malachi Williams, who is a Viper. And this is his first visit to Notre Dame. He's a guy that I have ranked as a top 50 level prospect. I think he is a big time explosive athlete, great first step, great reactive athleticism. What I mean by reactive athleticism is this is a guy who can like hunt pass rushers. He's a guy who can move and finish, because if a quarterback tries to escape, he can finish because he's a good enough athlete to adjust with this change of direction and things like that, which I think maybe doesn't get mentioned often enough with some of these pass rushers who, especially when guys are trying to like bend and dip and try to get to the quarterback. You got to be able to finish. You got to be able to react. And even if the guy makes you a miss and escape, can you go back and still stay on it? And I think he's someone who can do that. I'm interested to kind of hear how he looks kind of physically when he's there. But I think he's a pretty important player, like for Notre Dame in terms of a Viper candidate in this whole deal. Offensive line. So I mentioned Kirby Lambert's not going to be there. Unfortunate. Grant Bricks, he's another very important offensive line recruit who's going to be there. Man, he is just a mauler, a guy who just really just explosive, kind of in the Joe Otting way in terms of just into contact and just wants to like hurt people. And I mean that in the most complimentary possible. He moves really well. The comp is pretty bad, as you expect from a lot of these guys. We're from that area of the country, but he is someone you can't deny the traits. You can't deny the traits, and he has a chance, even though he plays in a very run-heavy offense. I would picture it much like Billy Schrauth, where you're like, this guy has all the tools to develop into a very good player in pass protection because of the mobility and the flexibility and all that. So, he's an important guy. Styles Prescott is going to be back on campus again. He's a local kid, local Indiana kid. Notre Dame was just on campus very recently, coming back again for another visit. Typically a good sign. I would say Notre Dame is in a really good spot for him. Notre Dame needs offensive tackles. He's definitely an offensive tackle. He's a left tackle candidate. He is massive. He's got those kind of like dancing bear qualities in terms of being like a 6'8" or 6'7" or however tall he is, guy who really can move his feet, and it's got really light feet. I would say he's a guy who needs to get stronger. But he can maul people at the point of attack and has got a nasty mentality, but definitely needs to get stronger, needs to develop his punch. He's got some work to do, but the pieces are there. The tools are there. There's a reason why like a program like Alabama offered him. And I think in this class too, when you're looking at guys that some of the top tackle guys in the class are guys that I'm like, I think this guy's going to play guard, because I just don't see it with some of these guys. And Prescott, I think, actually has legitimately like the feet and the length that you want to see in a guy who can play left tackle. Would probably not be a guy who played early, but a guy who can really help. So some of the other guys who are visiting, I mean, CJ Carr, Cam Williams, great to have those guys back on campus for Notre Dame. Obviously, critical pieces. I think Isaiah Canyon and Micah Gilbert, 2 receivers that are visiting. Isaiah Canyon, one, he's got some verifiable testing numbers that I think are great. Like he runs a 4.5 flat. He's got, I think the way he moves and the way you see him adjust and track the ball and get vertical, I would think is as a little similar to Tobias Merriweather. I think he's raw, and I think Tobias Merriweather is bigger than him, and so he's like a smaller version of that. But there are some kind of like vibes in that direction. He's somebody. I mean, this is his second visit in a while, so he might be someone who could, commit sometime if Notre Dame does well with him on this visit. Micah Gilbert, I mean, he's a big guy. He's got some good body control. I think he's a little bit like a Jaden Thomas, got some sneaky yak ability, kind of like a big slot, maybe a little bit stiffer than Thomas, but I mean, I think he's a good prospect, not like a lights out guy, but I mean, certainly I think would be a pretty decent get in the class. And obviously it helps that he's going to be there this weekend too. Linebacker Bodie Calhoun, who was already on campus pretty recently too. He's a lacrosse guy. Always like the lacrosse guys in terms of when you're talking about guys who've played, multiple sports. And I think it's a good indicator when a guy, because there's just a lot of like movement there in terms of there that I think is good, kind of almost similar to basketball in a lot of ways. Tyler James, any commitment close enough to possibly make a commitment? Not that Tyler James. I mean, I figured from your picture, Tyler, that you weren't that Tyler James. I know Tyler. He certainly doesn't have he wishes he had your hair. I think that's safe to say. I mean, I think you would look at the 2 guys that I just mentioned, Prescott and Canyon. I mean, Cahoon too, because he's been a guy who went earlier too, like who just visited recently. I think anyone who makes a couple visits in the spring and has been on campus multiple times, those are always candidates that they could. And maybe they'll wait till the summer. These guys, you never know. Maybe they'll wait till May or whatever. Sometimes 2 guys do it on campus, but then they don't say anything or whatever. They want to have their own home thing too. But yeah, any of those guys who are on there the multiple times, 1, it shows that they have that interest. And 2, it shows that Notre Dame is like, yeah, we want you, come back. Like, please, come back. We want you to get to know people better. We want to get more comfortable. So those are like, I would say, the guys that kind of stand out of those. I mean, Bryce Young too, maybe, right? Because he's obviously been, but like TJ Lindsey, he has been in Notre Dame before, I believe, but I mean, it's been a while, and he's like, I think he went to like Texas or Texas A&M. I think he's been to those places multiple times over spring. So like, is this guy really just going to come back to Notre Dame and just be wowed again? I think it's more about like him getting up there and getting like comfortable enough that you're like, okay, this cements Notre Dame as like a finalist for him, and maybe the leader or whatever. And we'll see how it goes. And then can you close from there? And that's kind of where you're, because obviously it's the kind of thing where, I mean, a lot of big programs want him. All right. So there's some safeties who are going to be there. Davis Andrews is somebody who's going to be on campus. He's a guy from Utah, fluid athlete, tracks well, good ball skills. I mean, he makes a ton of plays. Got some edge to his game too. A really good tackler, big time production. I would just say the thing with him is I'm not sure about his speed. When I just pop on the tape, he doesn't jump above. I don't know how fast he is. Just watching him on film. And usually with those guys, you kind of want to know maybe some track time, some verifiable 40 times, whatever. And maybe he has that, and Notre Dame is all on board with it. But I think that's part of the reason why he's like a 3-star guy and why I have him kind of graded as a 3-star is because of that. Because I think if you look at his film, you're like, why isn't this guy a 4-star? And I think that's probably it, because I think just as a pure football player, the guy's a good ball player. He's definitely a good ball player. And there's a baseline with him there too that you think like, I always think when you get a guy like that, he's a guy you can help the roster, but like, how good is he going to be? Is he going to be more than is he going to be a starter and all that kind of stuff? Is this guy going to have a shot at the NFL and be an NFL player? And a lot of that times that comes down to athleticism and how a guy tests and where you think that guy's going to be at later on in his time. Justin Denson, another guy who's going to be on campus, who's really kind of interesting guy. I mean, he's got a 4.51 40. That doesn't show up for me on film and it's hard too because he plays on like a lot of I believe he's a Rhode Island guy, so it's like it's hard because the competition is weird there. It's weird as in not that great, and it's like the quality of the field that they're playing on isn't great at a lot of these places. Like there's a lot of grass where it looks like, hey, no one has cut this for 7 years. It's not exactly, they're not exactly playing on field turf. He's got really good ball skills. He's got a ton of production. He's definitely a superior athlete to all the guys he's playing, and he's long. I think probably one of these things too, where he's a guy who's really shown out in 7-on-7 stuff lately. And I think that's kind of why he's blown up, and he's got a really, really good offer list. An intriguing guy for sure. I kind of want to know a little bit more about him, and I want to hear what they kind of have to say about him and what we hear from it after this thing. Brian Huff, who's a linebacker, but I would say he's more of, I think could be an edge guy. I don't know. I like some other linebackers better in this class. I do think he works through the trash pretty well as an inside linebacker. I like his size. Is he an edge guy? Is he a linebacker? Is he an off-ball linebacker? Looks like kind of a tweener to me. So where is he at? Where is he at in terms of size? And I want to hear kind of how they feel about that. Certainly, he's a guy I would want to see more from as a senior, and kind of to see where they're at there. And those are the big guys out of the 2024 class. And let's face it, most people are Carson Hobbs, Leonard Moore, 2 commits that are cornerback commits that have already been on campus recently. Always good to get commits back on and get those guys solid. Those guys are 2 very good prospects, like them both. So good to have those guys back. But those are the main 2024 guys that are visiting, unless somebody else pops up. Always could happen. And then they got a bunch of 2025 guys. Won't really dive into that much. I will say Jerome Bettis Jr. is going to be on campus. And I got to say, I think he's a stud. I think he's pretty good, unsurprisingly, based on the pedigree with his father. I think he's got a really high ceiling. And I think it's crazy because all these guys that I think people of my age who grew up watching Jerome Bettis, Bryant Young, Emmett Mosley's kid is another kid who's a Notre Dame target. Although I don't know where he kind of stands on their board right now. Little bit. I would say a little bit surprised that he's not didn't come back for the spring. All right, so I don't know where they see him or how he sees Notre Dame at this time. But anyways, regardless, there's a lot of legacy guys from those 90s Notre Dame teams that have kids now. And they're doing, obviously, Eli Reardon, Scott Reardon, is his father. And Eli, I think, has got to be a chance to be a great player for Notre Dame if he can stay healthy, obviously, because he's had the 2 ACLs, and that's always a problem. But listen, Drew Tranquil, he's a perfect example of the guy. Not only did he recover nicely from his back-to-back ACLs, he ended up being a terrific player for Notre Dame. And he's a pretty good player in the NFL too, right? And he's dealt with injuries there too, and still maintain with it. Some guys are just kind of built for it. He's obviously an incredibly smart football player. either end, I think it's, I mean, I would say ceiling wise, as high as like most of the top guys that Notre Dame has had. I think he has a chance, like a Cole Kmet type, definitely, and maybe even a better, maybe even a bit faster than Cole, right? So I think, that'll be interesting to watch. All right, well, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I mean, I can't believe I just basically talked for an hour by myself. I mean, did the solo show. I pulled a Greg. Greg, I know he does a great solo shows Sundays after Notre Dame games. He always does his kind of review. Just want to remind everyone, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. Apologies for all of the problems that we had during this. I obviously, what can you do? Sometimes there's technical difficulties. What do? You make the best of it. And I just also want to remind people that it's, you can, whether you're watching live or watching not, it's also, we're a podcast too. You can download the podcast on Spotify. You can download the podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's on Google, whatever the Google thing is. I don't know. Whoever uses the Google thing, go for it. Right. So I would say that, go ahead and subscribe there. Give us 5 stars. We're just 5 stars at the yin yang on there too. So check us out there. Saturday after the blue gold game, we'll be going live. Hidden Hustle, me, Greg, and the Godfather, Mike Frank, will all be going live talking about, everything we saw from the game. Hopefully we get some exciting stuff. I'm hoping for it. Hopefully we get some good recruiting news out of that. Let's all hope for it. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you on Saturday after the blue gold game.